All righty. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar on QuerySurge and Azure DevOps in the Azure Cloud. Eric Smyth, QuerySurge's Director of Alliances, will be kicking off the webinar with slides to frame QuerySurge, our Azure DevOps plugin, and the Azure Cloud platform. Then Matt Moss, QuerySurge's Product Manager, will be providing a demo. If you have any questions, please type them into your chat window. We'll answer as many as we can after Matt's demo. Also, please use chat to let us know if there are any issues. Thanks again for your time and participation, and now I'll hand it off to Eric to kick off. Eric?
Thank you, Bill, and thank you for all those who are attending. As Bill mentioned, my name is Eric Smyth. I'm the Director of Partner Alliances at RTTS, which is the parent company of QuerySurge. We're going to start just talking about our top-level agenda. We're going to do a quick overview of the QuerySurge product. For those of you who are not familiar with it, just explain what it does, what it's used for, and how it can potentially help you with your data testing. From there, we're going to talk about the QuerySurge offering that is available now in the Azure Marketplace, some of the new features that you now have available in the marketplace, and how you can implement it within your organization. From there, we're going to transition to the integration with Azure DevOps. QuerySurge had a previous integration with Azure DevOps, but we've enhanced it quite a bit, and we're going to show off some of the different features of that. And then from there, we're going to turn it over to Matt Moss, who is going to do a demonstration to show you exactly how to spin up QuerySurge in the marketplace, as well as how to set up that Azure DevOps integration. Before we start, though, just a little bit about RTTS. RTTS is the parent company of QuerySurge. We are a premier software and service provider focused on software testing. We've been in business for 25 years now, headquartered in New York City. And we've been a key Microsoft partner since 2005. We were very early on involved in the Microsoft testing products, and we are now ALM Gold competency partners around the DevOps space. So to start a little bit about QuerySurge, QuerySurge is the smart testing solution for automated validation and testing of data. Our use cases are listed here. Many of our customers are using QuerySurge for data warehouse ETL testing. They have many different data sources. Those data sources are ETL'd into either data warehouses or data marts, and QuerySurge can automate that process, compare the data between the source and target systems, and handle the transformation tests that need to be done. QuerySurge also supports big data environments such as data lakes, NoSQL data stores, HDFS file systems, and any other type of big data architecture that's out there. QuerySurge has a very good use case for DevOps continuous testing. We're going to showcase some of that with your Azure DevOps integration to show you how you can kick off tests from a CI/CD pipeline. As organizations go through their digital transformation, many organizations are involved in data migration projects where they are moving data from on-prem locations into the cloud, or they're changing their underlying data architecture, or they could potentially just be doing an upgrade of the data store vendor software. In these types of scenarios, QuerySurge can be used for data testing to compare data pre-migration and post-migration to ensure that the data is accurate after the migration is complete. We have an interesting solution for BI report testing. We've created drivers that are able to extract data from visualizations in various different BI reports. We can take that data and then compare it to data from other reports, data from the data mart that's feeding into the reports, or even its original source. And lastly, enterprise app ERP testing. If you have many different sources that are being consumed by your ERP system, QuerySurge has the ability to make sure that the data is making it into that system correctly. So how does QuerySurge work? In a nutshell, we have a concept of a test which we call a query pair. And when you design that test, what you do is you define the two data endpoints that you want to test. You'll specify a source system, which could be a traditional database, mainframe, a flat file, or a web service. And at the same time, you'll also designate a target system, which could be a data lake, data warehouse, data mart, or BI report. And at the time of execution, what QuerySurge will do is it will request data from both source and target systems, and will retrieve that data and return it into comparable result sets. And QuerySurge will look to validate every single cell of every single record that's returned from the two requests. And it will be able to report on any type of data anomalies, such as source records that didn't make it into the target system, or perhaps there was an aggregate calculation being done with your source information, and that value is displayed incorrectly in your target system, or truncation problems, or any other type of bad data issues that you can think of. And then what QuerySurge will do is it will take all of that information, roll it up into reports and graphs to give you an insight into the overall health of your data. From a process perspective, if you take a look at our simplified data architecture, we know that the way data is moved from point to point is that ETL developers will write scripts to code that data movement based off of some type of requirement or mapping document. Typically, this will be done in Python scripts, and those mapping documents will include where the data is coming from, where it's going to, and what manipulation has to happen to the data in order to fit into the new schema. So the way QuerySurge works is we can design tests around these different endpoints or the different legs of this ETL process. And after each of those jobs are executed, you can fire off the QuerySurge tests that are related to those jobs to pinpoint if there are any data issues, exactly where within the architecture those data issues were introduced, which can be very helpful from a debugging standpoint. Some of the benefits of the QuerySurge solution, we have a concept of projects. So if you have some users who are working on a project with highly sensitive data, you can spin off those users and those connections and that data set into a different project, so other QuerySurge users will not have visibility into that information. We polled the industry and found that all of data testing, if you look at what they're doing, typically 75 to 80% of the types of tests are what's referred to as pass-through mappings, where there's little to no transformation happening to that data. For those types of tests, we've developed a query wizard, which is a graphical interface which allows users to easily build tests graphically using drag and drop features to align tables and columns to make the designing of the test a much quicker and easier process. For more sophisticated types of tests where you may be joining information from multiple sources or doing some pretty sophisticated aggregation, we have a design library which allows you to build custom tests to handle those more complex scenarios. And we have a lot of new features that will enhance the testers' work in this area, such as parameterization with our snippets. We have a concept of thresholding, which will allow tests to pass as long as the value falls within a specific numerical range. We have a staging area, which allows you to park data temporarily for a multi-pronged process, and a lot of other interesting features to kind of assist with these more complex tests. Everything in QuerySurge is designed with automation in mind. So we build these individual tests to be grouped into suites that can be kicked off across multiple agents to cut down the overall testing time and get you your results quickly. We can test across a wide variety of different platforms. Typically, as long as the data is accessible from the QuerySurge server or agents, we are able to pull that data out and use it for testing purposes. We have a full API, which allows you to essentially integrate QuerySurge into any type of workflow that you may have. And we have several data intelligence and data analytics reports to give you insight into the overall health of your data. We also provide you the ability to create custom reports or custom graphs by exposing our metrics to either queries or BI tools. We could support over 200 different data stores. We come bundled with about 15 different drivers. But for any of the drivers that we don't come bundled with, you can simply go to the vendor's website, pull down those drivers, load them onto a QuerySurge agent, and they can be used for testing purposes with QuerySurge. You can see there's a wide variety of different technologies that you can use when working with QuerySurge. So in summary, QuerySurge dramatically increases your data validation coverage, helps you detect data issues earlier in the pipeline, helps leverage analytics and intelligence to find bad data, helps you improve your data quality at speed, and provide a significant ROI. So that's our high-level summary of what QuerySurge is and what it does. We're going to shift a little bit now and discuss the topic of the webinar, which is how can you start using QuerySurge in Azure? So QuerySurge is now listed in the Microsoft Azure Marketplace. You can go to the Azure Marketplace, run a search, and QuerySurge will come up as one of the offerings. Some of the benefits of consuming QuerySurge in the Azure Marketplace is you can start using it in minutes. So as long as you have an active Azure account, you can launch a virtual machine that has QuerySurge pre-installed and ready to go. No physical hardware is required because this is all hosted in the Azure cloud. We've had customers sometimes having to wait weeks and months in order to get the hardware ready in order for them to start using our product. With Azure, you can literally spin it up in minutes. No installation is required. QuerySurge is pre-installed within the virtual machine images within the marketplace, so it's as quick as just getting the image started up and running, and then you can go right in and start using QuerySurge. No software approval process is needed. A lot of organizations have significant security concerns, and there's a long review process about bringing a new software application on board into an organization. Much of this has been pre-done already in the Azure Marketplace, and we've kind of had that stamp of approval, which allows you to simply use the product without having to go through the normal review process. One of the big changes that we implemented is we've been in the marketplace for some time, but we've always been there with what we refer to as a bring your own license, where it would you'd have to purchase a QuerySurge license separately and then apply that to the image inside of Azure. That's no longer the case. We now have hourly billing so that anyone can start using QuerySurge right away without having to go through the normal procurement process of obtaining those licenses. And there's also a free trial available in the marketplace. So anyone who just wants to launch QuerySurge and experience it and try it out before purchasing it can do that directly in this marketplace. If you go to our marketplace offering, you'll see that there are several different packages that are available. These packages are broken up into different user groups. So QuerySurge typically is priced per user. So we have different number of user packages. So you can see a 2-pack, a 5-pack, a 10-pack, and a 25-pack. So depending on how many users are going to need to be using QuerySurge for that project, you can select the appropriate package. In addition to that, we also have some packages that have some of the add-ons that are available. So some of the add-ons QuerySurge has, for instance, is the ability to import and export your query pairs in and out of QuerySurge, as well as our DevOps add-in, which gives full API capabilities. So depending if those are features you need, you can select the proper package that includes the add-ons or do not include the add-ons. And this gives you the flexibility to find the price point that works for you. We also make some recommendations for the type of hardware or the virtual machine hardware that you'd be using for your purchase, depending upon the size of the data you want to test and the concurrency that you want to run testing. That may vary for your organization, but you can see we recommend a few different configurations for you to choose from, and based off of those configurations, it will show you the infrastructure cost, the software cost, and at the end, your total monthly cost of the implementation for these types of deployments. So I'm going to shift gears again. So that was a summary of our offering in the Azure Marketplace. The other topic of this webinar is discuss our integration with Azure DevOps. We've had an integration with Azure DevOps for some time, but the integration required a couple things. One, you'd have to be using Visual Studio unit tests to be executing the QuerySurge executions, and those tests would have to be run through our command line integration, and then that would be able to do the execution and roll the reports in. So one of the things we've done to simplify the process is we've created new predefined tasks within the Azure pipeline that you can simply select, and then what that will do is that will give you a template for your YAML script that you can then go and modify and customize. So it makes it very easy now to implement QuerySurge from the Azure pipelines. And one of the big advantages is we're now executing these tests through a RESTful API call. So what that means is there's no longer any requirement to have the QuerySurge command line integration component installed on the machine that was running these types of tests. One of the other advantages of the RESTful API is that prior to this new release, you would need to use local build agents to be able to run the test that had this command line integration component already installed. With the new RESTful commands that can be executed from the pipeline, you can now use hosted build agents within Azure, which gives customers more flexibility. So for example, you could set up a pipeline that looks something like this, where you would execute some type of ETL job. And then once that job is complete, the next step in the pipeline would be a task that would run the QuerySurge tests associated with that job through our API. Those tests would then run, the results would then get fed back into Azure DevOps, and then you can put conditional logic based on those results, either to go to your next step in your pipeline or to run some type of reconciliation job. Here's just a screenshot. If you go to your pipeline, you'll see on the left some of the predefined tasks. All you need to do is type in QuerySurge into the task search bar, and you'll get two options: one to run the various test suites that QuerySurge has, and another to get the results after those executions have complete. And to the right, what you'll see is a sample pipeline that would be generated by selecting those items. And then lastly, once the tests have been executed through the pipeline, your results would look something like this. They would come back into the test summary of the build that was executed from the pipeline. Up at the top, you'll see that we have tests, individual tests that are going to be mapped to the query pairs that are executed. So as many query pairs that are run from QuerySurge, those will show up as individual test results in the summary section. And then down below, you'll see the individual test results. The names here will match the query pair names that you see in QuerySurge, as well as the individual status of those query pairs. And if you go ahead and double click on one of those individual query pairs, that will open up a window to the right in Azure DevOps. It will show you, of course, when that test has run, but in addition, it'll tell you the overall status in the debug view. It will give you additional metrics as far as how many records were retrieved from both your source and target systems, how many row count differences or failed row counts that you have, as well as a URL that will be able to take you to QuerySurge directly to where those results reside. This is also an upgrade. In our previous implementation, the only thing you'd be able to see in the error message was essentially the URL that would take you to the results. Now you'll see more defined metrics, so you can get more detailed from your Azure DevOps results. So hopefully that provides a high-level overview of the new features in QuerySurge and how it integrates with Azure DevOps. What I'm going to do now is turn it over to Matt Boss, and he is going to provide a demonstration to kind of show you how some of this works. So Matt, I'm going to transition you over to presenter, and you can go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Eric. Going to share my screen right now. So with this demo, we're going to give a high-level overview on how QuerySurge can integrate as part of your CI/CD pipeline in Azure DevOps, and also show you how you can spin up a QuerySurge instance in the Azure cloud in a pay-as-you-go model. Setting up QuerySurge with Azure DevOps is incredibly simple. With our partnership with Microsoft, we actually have produced a plugin which can be installed on any Azure DevOps instance, whether it's hosted in the cloud or hosted internally in your network. To get the extension, you're just going to go to the Visual Studio Marketplace. And you'll see at the top, Visual Studio has a bunch of different marketplace offerings, whether it's Visual Studio, the developer tool itself, or in this particular case, we're looking at Azure DevOps extensions. To find the QuerySurge extension, all you need to do is search for QuerySurge, and you'll see that it pops up right away. Click on the extension, and in order to install it, all you have to do is click the Get It Free button right here. If you're signed into your corporate account and have access to install the extension, you'll have a pop-up that appears like this. You may have a login screen that occurs before, in which case you just have to log into your Microsoft account. You'll notice that there's two options here. We have the ability to install in the organization. In this case, this is my personal account for Azure DevOps. or I can download the extension and install it on a Microsoft Azure DevOps server that's hosted locally. For this particular demo, we're just going to use the cloud-hosted offering of Azure DevOps, so I'm just going to click the install button. This process takes only a few seconds to go through. You can see it installed our plugin near instantaneously. To jump into Azure DevOps, I can click the Proceed to Organization, which is going to open up my Azure DevOps instance. In Azure DevOps, you may have multiple projects that are set up. In this particular case, I have a single project called QuerySurge in my organization. The area that we're going to focus on is going to be our pipeline section. And what we want to do is have QuerySurge automatically get kicked off based off of a pipeline. This could be an ETL pipeline that is going through moving data from, say, our transactional databases to our data warehouse. Or it could be just a testing pipeline, which is specifically meant to kick off multiple test legs and based off of the outcome, change the types of tests that are being executed. To create a new pipeline, you click the Pipelines button, and you'll see you're given this nice screen to create a pipeline right here. What you need to select is where your code is hosted. QuerySurge supports any of the YAML pipelines. If you're going to use the classic editor, unfortunately that's not supported, but you can still call our APIs from it. It's just not as simple. For this example, I'm going to select the Azure Repos Git. And then it'll show me all of our Git repos that are currently hosted inside of Azure. I'll select QuerySurge, and this is where I'm going to store my YAML code every time I make a change. What you'll see here is a basic YAML pipeline. We can manipulate this in any way we want. For this particular example, I'm actually going to delete all of the code in here and start from a very clean-based pipeline. There's a couple of things to note in your pipeline setup. The first is the trigger. Right now, this is currently triggered to execute any time code is committed to my main branch. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to just set this to none. Triggering is incredibly useful as you can have your test automatically get kicked off when new code is pushed, or maybe based off of a time-based condition, or on the completion of other jobs. In this particular case, because it's a demo, I'm only going to trigger this manually. The next item that you see here is our pool. The pool is the particular set of agents that are going to be kicking off your tests. Within inside of Azure DevOps, you are given one free cloud-hosted agent or one locally hosted agent. The difference between the cloud-hosted agent and the locally hosted agent is that the cloud-hosted agent does have a limitation on the amount of minutes that can be used in the free version. If you're on a corporate account, you can actually spin up additional cloud and hosted agents at a cost, and all of that is listed on the Microsoft page. To see what your pool looks like, you click the project settings located in the bottom left. You go to Pipelines, Agent Pools, and you'll actually see all of the different pools you may have configured in your instance. In this particular case, my instance has a single pool. I can click on that and see what agents I currently have configured. In my current example here, I'm actually using a locally hosted agent. You can use both locally hosted or cloud hosted agents for your particular testing needs. I will point out though, if you're going to use a cloud hosted agent, you need to make sure that your networking is configured in a way that the cloud hosted agent will be able to communicate to your QuerySurge instance. I was able to avoid this by using a locally hosted agent. That way I can have that agent in my network and not have to worry about opening up any firewall rules or access to my QuerySurge server. Just adds an extra layer of security. In order to add executions into QuerySurge, all we need to do is click into our YAML script, and then we can click this Show Assistant button located in the top right. We can search for QuerySurge, and you can see here the two commands that Eric mentioned in our slide deck. The two main commands that we have are Run Test Suite and Get Results. You can call any QuerySurge API command inside of the YAML pipeline, but these are the ones that we've made a nice, easy to use, essentially wizard entry to add to your scripts without having to worry about the more complex RESTful commands. To execute a particular test suite, all we need to do is click the command in question. And what you'll see here is we just need to provide some details about our QuerySurge server and the item that we want to run. The first thing we need to provide is our host name. In this case, I'm going to use an IP address. And that IP address is actually going to be my local machine. So if we see here, I have a self-hosted server, and my IP address is 192.168.0.137. I can use a fully qualified host name as long as it's accessible from the agent itself. The port is the port that QuerySurge is installed on. By default, most users are using port 80. However, if you have SSL enabled, that would be probably port 443, and you check this huge HTTPS for extra security. We need to provide our username and password. Now, I can put my password in plain text here, but that would be visible to anyone that is accessing this particular pipeline. Microsoft has created a really useful feature. If you go to variables, you can create a variable that is not visible to any of your end users. You can update that particular variable. So if you have your password stored in it, you can make a change and update that at will. However, no one would be able to see what that password was. To create a new variable, you provide a name for your variable. So I'll call this demo password. I'm just going to copy that out. And then I can select this, keep this value as a secret. Now, when I type in my password, you see it's obfuscated. No one would be able to figure out what that password is. This is very useful if your pipelines are exposed to, say, your entire organization. To create this variable, I just click OK. And we can see now we have our variable right here. I can copy this to clipboard and paste that directly into my password field. And I just noticed that typo here. Thank you for Rajesh for pointing that out. The next things that we need to provide is our execution options. And this is information that we're passing along to QuerySurge. The first thing is our project ID. Because QuerySurge has multiple projects in its instance, and you can see that with our dropdown right here, we need to select which project we are going to be executing in. In my particular case, my project is project ID number 1. It's my first project in this instance. You can find your project IDs inside of your QuerySurge server. Each one of them has a unique identifier. The next thing that we need to select is our test suite ID. Test suites in QuerySurge are a collection of one or more query pairs. Whenever I kick off a test suite, all of the query pairs contained within that test suite will be executed. I will get a single result which will contain all of the outcomes for each one of these query pairs, and I can drill down and see individual data verifications that are occurring. For this particular demo, I'm going to be using the shipping test suite, which contains 5 query pairs. What you'll notice here on the left-hand side is we have a unique identifier, 861. That is the ID that we will need inside of our pipeline. So I'll come over here, I'll type 861, and I am done entering my test suite. The next thing that we need to provide is a scenario name, and this will be a unique name that will be displayed in our results. What I'm going to provide here is I'm going to call this shipping demo Azure, and I have some other options available. I can automatically append the time, which I will keep. And this way, if I run this multiple times, I will actually have the date time configured in each run, and it'll be easier to identify this particular execution. The next option that I have is I can actually pull this particular execution until completion. What does that mean? Well, if I just wanted to kick off a run and not monitor it, I can uncheck this particular checkbox, and if I save this particular item, what will happen is it'll kick off the execution and move on to the next step of our pipeline. This is useful if your pipeline is, say, dealing with real-time data and can't be delayed in any shape, way, or form. What you'll do is you'll kick off your test and the pipeline will move onwards. It will not continue to monitor your execution. If you want your pipeline to stop and pull for the outcome of your particular test, you'll check this particular checkbox. This way you can see the results of your test run and then action upon it. There's two other optional fields below. The first is if you want to fail this pipeline if an issue occurs in QuerySurge. You can actually cause your pipeline to stop executing if a failure, warning, error, or killed outcome occurs. Additionally, you can fail the task on error or killed. You can make it always succeed, or you can have it succeed with issues, which is our default setting. The timeout setting over here is how long this particular step of your pipeline will be monitoring. By default, it's set to 0, which means it will never time out. However, if you want, you can actually specify a timeout threshold, say 500 seconds, an hour, or whatever is pertinent for your particular pipeline task. I'm going to leave this as blank because I want this to monitor until my test completes. Once I have all the fields filled out, like we see here, and everything looks good to go, I can click the Add button. This will add this particular step wherever my cursor was on the YAML pipeline. So I click the Add button here, and what you'll see is our task has been added. All of the information that we filled out on the right side, which had our nice wizard capability, has been moved over. We can make edits here. So if we wanted to change our suite ID to 862, we can do that on the fly. If I want to go back to my wizard and just see what each field means, I can click the settings button at the top here, and that will open up. I can then make any modifications that are necessary. I'm going to save this particular item and have it automatically trigger. All this is going to do is kick off a QuerySurge run, monitor the outcome, and then end the pipeline. So I'll click Save and Run. It's going to commit my YAML to my main branch. And what we'll notice is once this kicks off, we have our job screen right here. This job screen contains a summary of the job itself, when it kicked off and how long it's running. But you'll see over here the job is currently queued. We can click on the job itself and get more details. And you can see each of the different steps that are available. So our particular job had some text output, which echoed out. But the one that we're really focusing on is our run task. And what you'll see here is, as I mentioned, it's monitoring our particular run execution. We're seeing in real time the monitoring of QuerySurge directly from Azure DevOps. And if we go into QuerySurge, we can see this particular run right here. So you can see its name is Shipping Demo Azure. It has our appended timestamp right here, and it just completed. What we'll notice is that this particular query pair completed with 4 errors, 1 query pair passed. And if we go to our pipeline right here, we can see that we have an issue. You'll notice that we have a failed outcome, and thus we have found some data issue or anomaly and fed that back into Azure DevOps. Now, we could leave it at this, but often we want to get the results from our run uploaded into Azure DevOps to either create defects or to have a tracking point that people can use directly in Azure DevOps versus logging into QuerySurge and seeing what's going on. To add the results to our particular pipeline is incredibly simple as well. All we do is we go back to our pipeline itself, we click this Edit button located in the top right. What we're going to do here is add a new command. So we'll go over to our tasks. We'll search for QuerySurge again, and we're going to select Get Scenario Results. Again, we're going to need to provide some information about our QuerySurge server. So we'll plug that in right now. We'll put our port as port 80. We'll do admin as our username, and then we'll take our variable, which we have, of our demo password. The next thing that we need to provide is our project ID, which is project ID 1. And if you notice here, we need something called a scenario execution ID. Every time we kick off a test, we get a unique execution ID for the test that we're running. This comes from our API and allows us to call in future commands and get the results from the particular execution that we ran. To get the execution ID, if we click this little icon right here, it actually describes the process of how you would get this. What happens is, in our previous task right here, we automatically create a variable. This variable is the name of the task, dot execution ID. So in order to do this, we should be able to just copy out our test results over here and pull that in like so. And we're just removing out some information here. Okay. So I'm going to provide a name here. Just give me 1 second. So we'll type in a name. That way we have something easier and more human readable rather than auto-generated. And I just need to put a space. We can call this anything that we want. In this particular case, I'm calling it run test suite task. All we need to do is provide a human readable name, and that would allow us to have our scenario execution ID. You can see it's the name dot execution ID. I will click where I want to add this particular result object. So I'll click add here, and we can see it works in the same manner as we saw before. It adds our particular task with all of our inputs right here. We need one other command that we need to add in here, and that is going to be the command to upload or publish our results. So I'm going to search for the word publish, and you can see we have a task here called publish test results. Our test results that we publish via QuerySurge is in JUnit format. Microsoft does support a few different test results types, such as NUnit, VSTest, XUnit, and CTest. For your particular use case, if you're going to be integrating with QuerySurge, you'll leave it at the default, which is JUnit. The next thing we need to do is specify the test results file. And this is always going to be a constant. It's going to be *//QS scenario result detail star.xml. All you need to do is copy that, and this information is documented directly in our knowledge base. Finally, we need to provide a folder that contains this particular file, and this is being published by our previous task. The folder in question is going to be locally on the agent in the temp directory. So all we're going to do is use a system variable that exists in Azure DevOps called agent.tempDirectory. This is pretty much going to be the same every time you use it. All you have to do is copy the same items over directly into your pipeline. We'll click Add, and we can see that our settings have been added in here. Now we have a fully complete pipeline. What this will do is kick off a QuerySurge task, which is going to be running test suite ID 861. We are going to be monitoring that run as part of that task. Once it completes, we're going to get the results of those tasks and publish them directly to Azure DevOps. So I'm going to click Save here. And we're going to go back to our pipeline. And what we're going to do is we're going to kick this pipeline off manually. Because I've set my triggers to none, we don't have any events that's kicking this off automatically. So I'm going to kick this off manually right now. I click Run Pipeline, and then it'll give me some options in terms of manipulating any variables that are necessary as part of this pipeline. This is going to kick this pipeline off and send it over to our locally hosted agent. We need to click on the job in question. That way we can see the different steps as they execute. As with before, we're going to run our test suite task, and you can see it's monitoring the outcome. In QuerySurge, we can see that our test has been kicked off. And we can see that we're getting status updates right here. Once this test completes, it's going to get the results from our scenario and publish them into Azure DevOps. That way, any stakeholders will be able to see the results of this run without having to log into QuerySurge right off the bat. What you'll see is our last step. We produced a single artifact. We have a outcome, 20% of our tests have passed, and our test has completed overall. We can go back to the job itself, and we can see our information here. We can see all of the changes that have happened as part of this pipeline and so forth. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click this published item right here. And what you'll see is the JUnit XML that was produced and uploaded automatically. This is not something that we recommend reading. It is not really human readable. It's just XML that is meant for Azure DevOps. Clicking over here, we can see our warnings, which is related to our failed job. We can set up code coverage if we so choose, and we can see that we have our test and coverage item. This is the same screenshot that Eric has shown. So every time you upload your test, you'll get a nice outcome like this. This is a high-level outcome of the test that you executed. What you can see here is we had 5 total tests, which correspond to our 5 query pairs. We can see them here. Out of those 5 tests, 4 of them failed and 1 of them passed, which is exactly what we see in QuerySurge. We have a single passing query pair, which is our date translation, and the other 4 query pairs here show some type of data issue or anomaly. To drill into any of these items, all we need to do is scroll down, and what you'll see at the bottom here is each one of our query pairs is actually an individual test. We can click on one of these query pairs, such as total shipping cost, different data fail. And what this will do is it will open up an error screen. And we can make this a little bit larger. And you can see here, tells us this particular query pair failed. The outcome was failed, not error or killed. We see the number of rows that came from our source, a number of rows that came from our target, any row count differences, the number of rows that have failures in terms of data, and the non-matching source and target rows. The final item that you see here is a hyperlink that goes directly to the results in question. That way, if you need to drill in and see what the outcome of this particular test was, in case of a, say, job failure, and you want to find out how many records have a particular column failing, or if you just want more details on the failure, all you need to do is take this hyperlink and copy that into your browser. In my particular case, I have that open right now. So all we're going to be doing is taking a quick look at what went wrong. As you can see here, we have the same values. Our source and target row counts and our failure row counts match exactly the information that is present inside of Azure DevOps. We can drill in and view the failures in question by clicking the Failures tab. And what we can see here is QuerySurge is highlighting that the shipping cost column for all of our records are mismatching between our source and target, which may be due to some type of ETL process error. Maybe a dimension table was loaded out of sync, or maybe an error in the actual ETL logic itself where it's incorrectly calculating shipping cost. We can export this information out directly from QuerySurge if we needed to pass it on to stakeholders. And if we wanted the raw data inside of Azure DevOps, we can get that information as well. In order to do that, you would need to use a custom RESTful command. And all you would have to do is very similar to how we added our existing tasks for QuerySurge. You can search for REST, and you can see the ability to invoke a REST API. This is not as clean as what we have here with our built-in plugin tasks, but we're always expanding what we're going to be having on the Azure DevOps platform. So more commands will be added to our existing plugin. That way you won't have to use this more complex approach for making command calls into QuerySurge. For those of you that are not familiar with QuerySurge's RESTful API, if you download QuerySurge or have a locally hosted QuerySurge, all you need to do is take your URL and add REST docs at the end. And this is a full Swagger documentation on the many commands that are available at our DevOps level. All of this allows for drill downs directly into your QuerySurge results. The items that I'm showing you here is completely free. There's no add-on cost related to QuerySurge whatsoever. Azure DevOps itself does have a free level for users. If you're using a self-hosted environment, there's no cost associated with it. If you want to try it out, you can do that with a trial account for personal use, or you can use, if you have a corporate account, set it up and use it with no cost to QuerySurge. That gives you a very high level understanding of how QuerySurge integrates with Azure DevOps. I just want to briefly touch on our Azure pay-as-you-go VM offering. For those of you that are not using QuerySurge currently, or for those of you that have QuerySurge and are looking for a more flexible solution in terms of licensing or spinning up and spinning down of extra instances, we have partnered with Microsoft to have a pay-as-you-go offering. This pay-as-you-go offering allows you to charge at an hourly rate the use of QuerySurge. And you can spin it up in the Azure cloud and not have to worry about any of the hardware maintenance or having to worry about setting up network connectivity if you're already in Azure. To find the QuerySurge offering, you're going to be going to the Azure Marketplace. And the Azure Marketplace is a great location that has a ton of information on all of the different VMs and apps that are available in Azure.
Hey, Matt. We have a lot of questions, so I hate to interrupt you, but I want to get to the questions because there's a lot of good ones here.
Okay.
All righty. You ready?
Yep.
All right. Is there a way to write SQL? Is there a way to write QuerySurge test cases in Azure DevOps Test Plans module and then manage the scenario from the Azure DevOps Test Plan?
So you could write SQL outside of QuerySurge and pump it in. Our API does have the ability to manipulate any of your query pairs. So if you wanted to programmatically have your query pairs fed in and have all of those items stored in Azure DevOps, you definitely could. I would highly recommend keeping them all inside of QuerySurge, just because QuerySurge has its own built-in source control management as well as enhanced reporting features. So if you're pumping in data, you probably want to have a query pair for each of the items that you have stored in your test plans or in your third-party source. So it is 100% possible. Just want to be aware that if you create, say, a set of blank query pairs that you automatically update and they don't tie back individually to particular assets externally, you lose some of the traceability built into the tool. And you can see inside of QuerySurge itself, there's a lot of traceability. You can open up any of your query pairs. Let me just open up one right here. You can actually have entire histories of all of your runs, so that way you can trace back different outcomes. You can have history of all of your modifications, so it's complete built-in source control management, and you can tag all of your assets for more enhanced reporting. So using it externally is definitely possible, but I would highly recommend trying to keep your assets inside of the tool just because you have so many extra features available to you.
All right, Matt. For parameterization, can we integrate with any automation tool and framework?
Yep. So with QuerySurge, we've spent a huge amount of effort enhancing our API capabilities. QuerySurge can integrate with anything that can call a RESTful API or command line. We have both a fully robust RESTful API, as well as a command line API that can be called by shell or batch scripts. We have examples of it through PowerShell. We have examples of it with just simple bat files, Java, C#, and the like. Pretty much anything you want to integrate QuerySurge with, we can definitely integrate with.
All right. Can QuerySurge test graphs versus data from HiveDB?
So if you're discussing graphs in, say, a BI tool, QuerySurge can connect to multiple BI tool platforms, whether it's Tableau, MicroStrategy, Cognos, SAP Business Objects, and just recently released Power BI. What you can do is actually query the data behind a graph and validate that against any other database. So Hive is one of the many databases that QuerySurge can connect to. So you can definitely do that if you wanted to pull out, say, a line graph or a pie chart or any particular visualization on any of those platforms.
Is there dummy test data available for the free trial?
Yes. So if you spin up QuerySurge, whether you use our trial in the cloud, which is a 3-day trial self-hosted by us, or if you locally host a QuerySurge instance in, say, Azure or in your data center, you can create a new project with trial data. All of our trial data includes sample query pairs, test suites, and the like. So that way you can get a look and feel for how QuerySurge works without having to connect to your data sources, which might be a challenge if you're just wanting to try out the tool itself.
Okay. We currently use Jenkins and command line files. Are there plans on your roadmap to implement a Jenkins plugin that shows QuerySurge test results similar to how you're showing results in Azure DevOps?
Yes, we do have plans to expand to other CI/CD platforms, specifically Jenkins. We started with Microsoft because of our great relationship with Microsoft and just the usability of their DevOps pipeline. But we definitely plan on branching out to other CI/CD platforms, as well as just expanding our existing plugins that we have on Azure DevOps.
Are query pairs primarily used for source and target comparison to test tables, to columns, or record level?
We actually see both, but the main power of QuerySurge is we deal with cell-by-cell comparisons. Rather than, say, do a high-level count star or, say, do aggregations on a table, if you have 1 million records or 100 million records, you can pump that through QuerySurge and do a cell-by-cell verification. That way you don't have to do 2 tests. As you can see here, I'm only testing a small amount of records, but if I only had aggregation or high-level information on it, when I view the results, I won't know what went wrong with my particular ETL process. I'll have to write some extra queries. The real advantage of QuerySurge is you get results that tell you exactly what went wrong in your ETL process. In this particular example here, we can see truncation issues with our customer first name. We see mistranslation issues over here, and we see extra records in our source and target. So it allows us to really understand what's going wrong in our data and if our ETL process is 100% correct.
Okay, what are the supported operating systems for virtual machines that are running on Azure?
Our current supported VM offering is only Windows. However, if you want to use our BYOL offering, where you spin up a instance yourself, we support Red Hat Enterprise Linux, Fedora Core, and CentOS. We are looking to expand to more Linux-based operating systems, and that would be available only on the BYOL. So you have that flexibility. If you want the hourly rate, it's currently set up for Windows Server 2019.
I would like to hear more on the Power BI integration.
So our Power BI integration is brand new with QuerySurge. We're going to be releasing out release notes for it. We have a brand new article that's going to be published, I would say, it might actually already be out in the wild. Let me just take a quick look in here. This is our knowledge base. So for anyone that has never used QuerySurge, we try to document all of our functionality directly on our knowledge base. We have hundreds of articles that go into very good detail on how to integrate QuerySurge with pretty much any data platform out there. So if I search for Power BI, you can see here we have writing queries against a Power BI report. And this gives you step-by-step instructions on how to get data from a particular visualization. So what you can see here, I'm trying to get from this particular bar/line graph here, which is sales and average price by month. And all we would be doing is actually writing a query. The query that you write is really a unique item to just QuerySurge. This includes the group ID that contains the report, the report ID that is identified for that particular report, the page name, because you may have multiple pages in your particular instance, the visualization name, and this is a Boolean value if you would like to use summarized or unsummarized data. And the great thing about QuerySurge is you actually just write SQL against it. It's like you're dealing with a data source such as Hive, such as SQL Server. You can do joins, aggregations, filter conditions, anything that you want. We support all of the base visualizations in Power BI. If you have, say, custom visualizations, those are not supported at this time, but we're looking to have that added in the future.
Can QuerySurge compare data transformations?
Yep. Inside of QuerySurge, you can write SQL that is anything that is compliant with your data technology. So in this particular case, I'm dealing with Oracle. I can write any of the transformations. Often what we see our customers doing is they'll have a query on, say, the source side, which will be a select star. And then they'll test their transformations on the target side with anything that is compliant with that data platform. So if they need to do aggregation, concatenation, filtering, anything is possible inside of your query itself. And we actually have a wizard which allows you to quickly create query pairs for those that are non-technical as well.
Can we write query pairs at local hosted QuerySurge and connect to data lakes in Azure directly?
You definitely can. The important thing to note is that if you're connecting to a remotely hosted data store, that you will need to have network communication open between your QuerySurge server and your remote database. And we highly, highly recommend using a VPN tunnel. I believe Azure has multiple options, especially fast options that are great for testing data. The option in question that I'm thinking about is called Express Route, which directly links your data center to Azure. So you have a nice secure connection between your QuerySurge server and Azure, and it's fast.
Will additional commands be added to the plugin?
Yes, we have on our roadmap additional commands. As I pointed out on our demo, we have a huge amount of RESTful APIs available inside of QuerySurge. Our hope is to continue to expand the commands that are available in the plugin to better fit testing needs. These include commands that will allow you to update, parameterize your particular tests. So we have here our snippets, and snippets are our parameterization object. So you can actually feed into your QuerySurge tests variables that change how your tests run. So we're definitely interested in expanding it. We have that on our backlog right now.
Can you write the YAML file using Python and libyaml binding?
That I would have to get back to you on. I've not done that inside of Azure DevOps. I would have to see if that is a capability built into their platform. I don't see why it should be an issue, but I'd have to double check that particular item.
Can we connect GCP storage as a data source?
So as long as it has a JDBC compliant driver or a RESTful API, we can definitely call into it. QuerySurge, I think, connects to pretty much every data platform on the market. When you're dealing with QuerySurge, the connections that you set up are all JDBC-based connections, and you can see that here. I have a bunch of connections configured. The great thing is if there is a driver that we don't come bundled with, you can drop that right in. We have a ton of partnerships with technology vendors out in the market, as well as JDBC vendors. And we have the ability to call out to APIs, flat files, or as we talked about, BI reports.
All right, Matt, last question. If we haven't got to your question, we will answer them privately, but we thank you for all the questions that were here. Last question is, what regions is the pay-as-you-go offering located in?
So we've opened the pay-as-you-go offering to all regions. So no matter where you're geographically located, you can spin up your QuerySurge instance as close to your data as possible. And we highly recommend when you spin up your QuerySurge server that you put that geographically in the same region as your data itself. And the reason for that is you have network overhead when it comes to data transfer. And if you're testing, say, billions of records, that can add up and slow down your testing effort. So we highly recommend putting it in the same geographic location. But Microsoft has been amazing when it comes to Azure and has spawned up data centers across the entire globe. We have pushed our Azure offering to all of their data centers. So no matter where you're located, you will have probably a Azure location very close to your data.
Great. Well, that wraps up our Q&A session. Thanks again for your time and participation today. Again, we will be following up with an email to you with a link to the recording and our contact information if you have any additional questions. And we will try to get back to everyone who did ask questions that we were not able to answer. We'll send you an email following up with an answer to your questions. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.